um, that we can have it available for everyone who's unable to attend today. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raymond Barrett, and I'm the director of the grants team here at the Department of Family and Support Services. And today I am joined by some of my colleagues, and I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Nicole Roberts.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Nicole Roberts, Director of Accounting with the DFSS Finance Division. Thanks for joining today. I'll hand it off to Sheree Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheree Johnson. I am the Manager of Family Support Programs over our Program Operations and Quality Unit here in DFSS. Welcome, welcome. I will pass it to Lori.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Walls. I am a fiscal administrator with our grants unit, and I am responsible for governance for our governing board for the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. And I will hand it off to Kathy.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Wiggins. I am the Grant Research Specialist for the Grants Division, covering the portfolio for the CSD grants, which includes Head Start. I will pass it over to Raymond Barrett again.
Thank you, Kathy. Maybe real quick, also, maybe Zariah, if you're on, you want to introduce yourself. I know they won't talk, you won't be presenting today, but maybe just so they can hear you in case they have questions and they interact with you. Zariah is still on mute, but we will get started. Well, thank you all once again for joining. So today we're going to talk about the fiscal year 23 Head Start and Early Head Start, CCP and expansion grant application process. Some of you are new to this, and some of you have seen this 100 times. But as you all know, federal grants are no joke, and this training is to help ground all of us in grant compliance, not just for this application, but really for the rest of the year. So you can see in today's agenda, we kind of already knocked out the welcome and introductions. We're then going to talk briefly about the overall grant application process. And then we're going to actually get into the nitty-gritty of going through the actual application instructions themselves. First, talking about the financial aspects and everything that you would see in your attachment A. Then moving on to the attachment B segments, which is your program narrative, your schedule, your goals, etc. And then we'll transition to section 3, which is your governance approvals, or also known as the attachment C documents. And then we'll have some contact information and some questions, time for questions at the end. If you do actually have any questions throughout, though, you can feel free to chat them out. We will wait till the end, and that's when we'll actually take questions themselves. So any kind of question you have, please write them down, you can put them in the chat, and we will address that here in a second. So first, let's talk briefly about these 4 grants. So just really basic background. If you did not know, in the 1960s and 70s, the United States saw a rise of various federal grant programs to address the inequities that we were and currently are facing as a country. So as part of the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, something called Project Head Start was formed. And so since then, it has developed into a multi-tiered grant that now consists of 4 different grants, which is why you see each one of those having their own little checkbox on the SF424A. The Early Head Start grant formed in 1995, CCP in 97, and then expansion being the most recent one. So Congress determines overall allocation amounts to the various federal agencies. In this case, the one that is relevant is Health and Human Services, also known as HHS, and then goes down through ACF to OHS, or also known as Office Head Start, where they then distribute it out to their various regions. And eventually this gets to DFSS and to you all, and we determine all of our subrecipients or our delegates through a competitive process. And that's you all. So the work is primarily done by you all, but obviously we're here to really help balance and support a lot of these heavy administrative compliance parts of the grant, so that you can actually do the work itself in the field. And so we're also there, obviously, as a strategic partner working with you all, and that's kind of just how this process flows. You can see here a breakdown of the different grants, the different age ranges, and the amounts that we receive as a city. But most importantly for today, it's the due date that you see, which is that the fact the grant application for DFSS is due on September 1st. So everything that we talk about today is all going towards our own, clicking that button, hopefully before September 1st, and doing so for each of these grants. And just other really basic things for you to kind of know is we, get a certain amount of funding, which helps determine our slots for each of the grants. The budget period, if you may or may not know, is December 1st of the current year and goes until November 30th of the next fiscal year. And these are all project periods of 5 years. This matters because, as many of you know, we have to go through a process where we're kind of doing a baseline application, which really is a lot of work. And then luckily this year, it aligns to a continuation application. And we'll talk about that more in a second, but luckily it's not as much work, it's still a lot though. So the grant application overview. This is a critical document. What I mean by that is the grant application is very critical. Along with the grant award, the application really drives everything. When you have a federal review, or we have a federal review that happens, all of that review stems from a document that is created. In this case, a grant application that states we are going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how we are going to do it. So it really is a document that states what our goals are, what the design is to the funder, and talks about impact as well. It provides a roadmap for the program. It provides the annual cost of the program, and it also discusses how we have the ability or capacity to carry out the program. So obviously we do this in coordination with each and every one of you. As you all are doing your attachments for the grant application, we also have our attachments for the grant application. And anything that you all say in your grant application impacts what we say in the grant application. Because once again, when we get reviewed, it really stems from this core document. So that's why we have to spend a lot of time kind of strategically partnering on it. So here on this slide, you can see the delicate grant application timeline that we have. So here in the beginning, in some of these blue circles that we've already passed, we figure out the funding levels based on need and obviously your input and feedback. And then we distribute out award letters and packages, which you all received yesterday. So we received that yesterday. And then today is where we're actually having a training and supporting you on how to develop your grant applications. But this is kind of misleading because it says today, which it is, but we will also be there throughout the entire application process to support you. So realize this is a little bit of a tough process, but we're all in it together. We also, like I said, have a narrative. We have our own budget section we have to fill out. So you're not alone. We're all in this to support each other. I've also put on here some key dates, which we will talk about here in a little bit and address individually. The first one being Friday, August 5th, where you all will work on your attachment A's, your attachment B's, are also known as your financial and program portions, and turn it into us on August 5th so we can provide any feedback, catch anything. Hopefully around August 8th to 12th, you have started scheduling your PPC and board meetings because your governance items are due on August 12th. I know there was some confusion on the emails. Yes, technically if you let us know that you have a board or PPC meeting after August 12th, but before August 19th, we could probably make that work, but please reach out to us and let us know. It's really important because we have a lot of paperwork flying our way, a lot of communication going back and forth with each and every one of you. So as much as you can be transparent about your part of the process, it helps us out. Really the goal is to try to minimize the amount of work that we all have to do to get through this process. So we kind of do a lot of reviewing while we're also doing our application. And then I put on here one extra little deadline, which you're not going to see on the packet, but I'm going to be relatively transparent with you all. On Friday, August 26th, if we do not have everything we need from you, which we will, I promise we will communicate that to you. After Friday, August 26th, we have to move forward with our application, and you will get an email that says you were not able to complete everything by the deadline. So you want to make sure that, like, for example, any feedback you get, regardless of it's the financial piece, programmatic piece, or governance piece, after Friday, August 26th, it really is like locked in. We have to move forward with our application. The Office of Head Start will see that you're missing documents. So please try to follow each of these little timeframes, stick to them. We're here to support you through them. We provide, this timeframe knowing that there will be some back and forth. So, make sure you hit them. And like I said, after August 26th, it really just moves forward from there. And, what we have is what we have. So we will obviously fully submit our grant application between the 26th and September 1st. And we have to do so by then. We'll talk about this individually here more in a second, but as you can see here, these are just the deadlines I kind of mentioned before. So once again, your attachment A's and B's, Friday, August 5th. Your attachment C, which is your governance items, by Friday, August 12th at 5 p.m. If for some reason your board meets, let's say that following Monday, we can probably work with you on it, but please, you have to email and let us know. Do not let us know what those days are, because we have to work with you on it. Okay, so you have all received at this point your award package. In that award package, you have various key application documents. The first being your individualized funding letters for each of your slot allocation and the funding amounts. And that is per grant. So if you get Head Start and Early Head Start, you'll get a funding award letter. If you get CCP as well, you'll get a funding letter, et cetera, for expansion. You're also going to you received a addendum instructions as well as a detailed instruction manual on how to complete and submit your full grant application. They are always slightly tweaked each year, so I would just make sure you review it and always pull it up while you're doing your application. It's super helpful. You also received your attachment A, which is a Excel document, which has your budget and budget narrative and also your SF424. We'll talk about that more in a second. You also received the attachment B1, which is the program narrative. This one was the most updated version that you provided. And after the grants team last year worked with you on any feedback Head Start provided. So it is the most updated document we have on file for you. So that was also in there. We'll talk about it more in a second. As well as the attachments B2, 3, and 7, which was an Excel document. Once again, the most updated version, post any edits, was also already provided to you. You'll also have a blank B8 brief program profile, which we'll talk about. And you also got your attachment C's, which we'll lead to later. That is your governance document. So one more thing before we get into the finance portion of it and get really through the details, just some general application tips for this year's grant application. First, very basic, but read the instructions thoroughly. Have the application instructions up while you're completing the document. I know some of you have done this many, many times, but as you all know, this is a relatively complicated process. And so I would highly recommend having it up, double checking your work, making sure it's done right. Also, this year, all the grants happen to line up in the cycle well. They're all continuations. So when it comes to those documents that I mentioned before, and we'll talk about here in a second, the program narrative and your B2, 3, and 7s, basically anything that you notice, oh, wow, this is already pre-filled out for me. Those are the most updated versions that you submitted last year. And after Head Start already provided any edits that they requested. So it is a pretty relatively golden document. That being said, everything, does have to get updated. If you had any significant changes, do it in track changes mode. Put track changes mode in, because when we submitted our baseline application, we all agreed and said, these were the X, Y, and Z goals. that we're going to do and accomplish. So we need to make sure that if any changes did happen for you all, we're still addressing the initial goals that we said we were going to fulfill, that we were going to impact the same communities that we said we were going to fulfill or serve when we initially applied for the grant. So there should be minor changes. And if there is any, please do it in track change mode. So for example, I'm going to talk about this more in a second, but if you had site closures or site allocation changes, you're going to need to add to your narrative why that happened. And if you have to do that, I highly recommend that you review and confirm every single part of your narrative section to just make sure that any aspect of your service delivery was either impacted or not. And once again, we'll go through this more here in a second. Lastly, documents must be legible. You can't read them, neither can Office of Head Start, I promise you. It's something simple, but just make sure you take the time to really make sure it's in color, it's scanned well. It minimizes the back and forth between each and every one of us. And it's extremely important for Office of Head Start. So we are now going to move to the financial pieces. And so I'll turn over back to Nicole Roberts.
Thank you, Raymond. All right, so I will go over section 1, the required attachment A's. Most importantly, this includes attachment A1, which is your budget and budget narrative. And then we have attachment A2, which is the cost allocation plan. In the past, I don't believe this has been strictly enforced, but this is a funder requirement. So we will need your current dated cost allocation plans on file. Please submit those. If you cost allocate, if you have various funding sources and cost allocate across those funding sources, we will need that on file for you. Attachment A3 is the indirect cost rate agreement. If you use select de minimis, please provide the memo. Otherwise, if you have agreed upon rate, please provide that agreement. Attachment A4 is a sample of your partner agency contracts. If you have partner agencies, please provide a sample agreement. And attachment A5 would be a copy of your depreciation schedule. So if you include any depreciation in your budget, you will be required to submit a copy of that schedule. Starting off with attachment A1, we will want you to label it fiscal year 23 _ your agency name _ A1. And I will share my screen. If you can allow capabilities, please. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so attachment A1 is comprised of several tabs. You'll start at the cover page and work your way to the right through each applicable tab. You will use your funding letter that you should have received yesterday to complete your attachment A1. So starting with the cover page, please complete all of your delegate information in section A. Section B, select your program type. A complete separate A1 is required for each individual grant. You'll update your number of funded slots, your federal funding amount. There is no required non-federal match that has been automatically waived again this year. And then the total projected cost and the max administrative cost will automatically formulate there. Second tab is the partner detail. If you have partners, you will list in the top table here, all of your partner information, the number of slots per partner, and the rate you will list here at the top. And the total cost for each partner will automatically populate. Now, you are required to allocate at least at a minimum of 50% of cost per child for your partners. And then at the bottom, for each of your partners, you will complete an individual budget. And so this top tab or this top table here will flow through to your budget narrative, and we'll get to that in a second. The next tab will be the detailed salaries. So this should be filled out for all individuals directly working for the agency. You'll fill in the employee name. There's a drop down for the Gabby title. You'll select the title and then the Gabby function will automatically populate. Enter the agency title. This is very important here to note that the agency title needs to match exactly if you're selecting any Gabby title in other category, this title here should match exactly what you're entering in the other section on the personnel tab. And we'll go through that more in a second. And then you'll list your current rate per pay period or hour, the number of pay period or hours. This annualized gross salaries will automatically populate. And then you'll indicate what % of time spent each individual is spending on each grant. And then the allocated gross salaries will automatically populate there. So you'll do that for every individual that you're budgeting within your specific budget. And then at the bottom, the footed total would then flow to the personnel tab. This job titles tab here is, there's nothing you need to do here. This is just a table that is populating into the Gabby function here on the detailed salaries. So on the personnel tab, most of these should flow over to the costs for program operation. If you have listed, such as this here, this example of the family counselor, which is an other position, you would need to make sure that the title matches exactly. So say I remove this portion of the title, you'll see then that the salaries drop off. So you'll want to make sure that all of those match exactly. If there is any difference in your total footed cost for program operations on your personnel tab from your footed total here in cell I-269, you'll know that it most likely is because there's a discrepancy in the job titles. So then you'll want to make sure that you list your FTEs as well. And all of this information here will then flow over to your budget narrative tab. And then next we have the fringes and non-personnel. You'll want to go through each of these sections and allocate your budget accordingly. If you're allocating in other, you should be able to update the tab. Go ahead and modify the description accordingly. So you'll enter all of your fringe. All of these sections will then flow through to the budget narrative accordingly. Travel, one thing to note for travel is that your one second. There it is. Your registration fees. You should include those in other. Those should not be included in your travel section of your budget. So this includes everything like your fares, your per diem, your lodging, but do not include any of the registration fees in this section. Those will be down below in other. So you'll go through each of these sections here. Contractual, the partners will automatically follow from your partner tab. Again, other contracts you'll want to update and specify. You can modify the column widths and the rows as well to make sure that they're fitting all of your descriptions accordingly. We want to make sure that nothing is cut off there. All right, you'll see that rent is not allowable for early Head Start child care partnership. All right, and then you'll see down here at the bottom, your total direct charges will be all of the fringes and non-personnel plus your personnel allocation. And so this allocation amount here in row 73 will carry over from your cover page. So you'll see that there's a table here where any errors automatically populate. And right now it's saying that your allocation does not match your budget because we didn't complete the cover page total. So if we were to go ahead and update that, you'll notice that the error message will go away. There's no error message there. So there's an error message that'll populate also if you are in excess of your 10% maximum administration costs. And then down at the bottom, you'll just want to reconcile and make sure everything ties out. And next tab is the other sources of funds. You'll want to update your number of slots, your cost per child, and you will list out any other sources of funds from you or your partner agencies. The SF 424A, there's nothing you need to do on this tab. Everything will automatically populate here. Make sure everything makes sense, everything reconciles. And then the SF 424 tab, this will need to be printed, signed, and dated from your board of directors chairperson and your parent policy committee chairperson. The next tab is the budget narrative. So I know this can look overwhelming when you first look at it, but just take it section by section. There are red prompts throughout each section of the narrative that we need you to complete. Please make sure that you update these. The budget amounts should flow through the previous tabs. All of the personnel information should populate here. What you'll need to do at the bottom is make sure that if there's any positions where there's descriptions that you are not budgeting for, you can go ahead and hide those. Make sure that you modify the descriptions accordingly as applicable to your program. You'll go through and do that for each section of the personnel. Next is the fringe benefits. The total amount will automatically update here and then in the table as well from each section of the fringes and non-personnel tab. Travel section, you want to make sure that you update this. Again, remember that registration fees should not be included here. The equipment section, this will automatically flow. Make sure you update the description accordingly. Supplies, the total budget will automatically flow through. You want to make sure that you're updating all the prompts. Please make sure, this is where we get many kickbacks from the Office of Head Start is when a methodology or evaluation methodology is not included in the description. They can be very specific with that. So if you are allocating multiple items, just please make sure that you provide a breakdown and make sure that it reconciles and ties out to the total that you're actually budgeting. Same thing with contractual. You'll want to make sure, again, the amount will automatically flow from the federal tab. The fringes and non-personnel, but you want to make sure that you're updating the descriptions and providing a valuation methodology. For example, you'll want to indicate what services are being provided from each of these contractual individuals, the number of hours, the rate per hours, etc. Down to the partners portion of contractual. The cost per child will automatically populate here. You'll want to update the prompts in red, and the table will also automatically populate from your partner tab. Go ahead and hide any rows that are not being utilized. Down to the other costs, again, the budget total will automatically populate. Please make sure that you provide a detailed description for any cost budgeted, and again, a valuation methodology. If there are multiple items being allocated, so there's a complete breakdown that reconciles to your total amount budgeted here. Your indirect cost amounts will automatically flow. Please complete this section, whether or not if you do not have an indirect cost rate, you have an approved negotiated rate, put your percentage there. Or if you have never had a negotiated rate and choose to adopt the de minimis rate. The next section, assurances that the budget aligns with program objectives. Please make sure that you complete all of the prompts in red. This section here is extremely important. We do receive a lot of kickbacks for, you want to ensure that your salaries and fringe benefits are between 60 and 80% of your total budget. If they are not, please provide a detailed description as to why they are not within that range. And there is a quick check here. This percentage will automatically show you where you fall within the salaries and fringe rate compared to your total budget. Complete the prompts in red. In this section, the COLA, this section is not applicable. And then the financial management, property management, and internal controls, please update this, the prompts in red, and any changes needed. And your non-federal match is non-applicable at this time. We have entered under the non-federal match waiver, the verbiage needed. You do not need to update anything here. And in the administrative limitation section, just update your agency name. And you want to make sure that your administration costs are within the 10% allotted. If you have any issues creating your budget, working through any of your budget tabs, please reach out to the individuals listed in the instructions and we will be happy to assist you. You can also enter any issues that you are having here on the exceptions tab. And then we can help you address those from there. Right, so I will stop sharing my screen. That's it for the attachment A1. And then if we can pull back up the slides. All right, next slide, please. All right, as I mentioned previously, due to COVID-19, the Office of Head Start is still automatically waiving the non-federal match. So you do not need to budget for any non-federal match within your budget. And again, A1 is your budget and budget narrative. And then there are the supplemental attachments A2 to A5. As I mentioned, A2 is the cost allocation plan. And here's the naming convention for each of these attachments. It'll be fiscal year 23 underscore your name, and then A2, A3, A4, etc. So please provide your cost allocation plan if you receive multiple sources of funding. And you are allocating a cost across those funds. If you have the indirect cost rate agreement, please provide that or your de minimis letter. If you have partners, please provide a sample contract. And if you are budgeting for depreciation, you are required to provide the depreciation schedule for us. And again, these attachments A1 through A5, if applicable, are due Friday, August 5th. And you can email those to the Head Start, Early Head Start Grant App inbox. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of the individuals listed here, including myself, and we will be happy to assist you. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, me and Sherry will lead this next session. For me to do it properly, I'm going to share a few things. So real quick, just kind of re-emphasizing a point earlier. So we have provided you for your B1s, your most updated B1 that you submitted last year, and with the edits that Office of Head Start had already provided. So the ones that you have are the most updated. So you're going to want to use that. So I'm going to share my screen. It's going to show a blank one. Remember, you have your updated one. I didn't want to share anyone's updated one, so you will not see the same thing. Here is my new one. I'll just do this. Here we go. Okay, so this is not necessarily what you're going to see because, like I said, you have already completed this document. So, record. Does everyone see my my Word document? By the way, I think I shared the right screen.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
we can.
sorry. So it's not going to look like this because you've already got it pre-filled in, which is a good thing. This means it's going to be much easier for you to do this. So you'll notice, for example, yours is not going to have a draft watermark anymore. That's because Office of Head Start really didn't like that draft watermark in there. So it's going to be removed. You're going to notice, if you remember from last November, it was me who was reaching out to many of you all and saying, hey, I'm trying to confirm if your service and recruitment area has changed in the past year. So you'll probably see a giant line on the top of it that says, no, it has not changed, and it's highlighted. That's completely fine to keep in or change if you have it changed. Remember, if any changes you make on your document, please click track changes so that we know what you've changed itself. And if you do not know what that is, you click review and you can click track changes. Now, the reason why we attached and gave you your most updated version is because all the grant applications this year are continuations. So for the most part, especially for a lot of you all, there will be very minimal changes you're going to make to your narrative, which is like a yay, you should be happy for. Obviously, if I forgot to do it for a few of y'all, I know I caught it for most of y'all, change it to fiscal year 2023. Anytime, obviously update times. You may want to do some minor updates, but please do it in track changes. Because if, for example, you have to do anything major, which some of you will have to do, where like maybe you have to change like, a site close or whatnot, you will have to reflect that in the document. But then when you do, please go through and make sure, for the rest of your document that anything that was impacted by those changes is reflected everywhere else, because I promise you, the Office of Head Start will ask that question. So you will already have a very much more updated version of this. Stick to that one and use track changes. You're only providing any updates that are really key, and the track changes helps us make sure, oh, is this something that we should actually move forward with it? That is the first document. That is your B1, your program narrative. And then I'm going to switch it to B2. I'm going to share this screen. And I'm going to have Sheree, you do this part. Can everyone see that one?
Yes, we can. Okay. Thank you, Raymond. Can you click on? So we have for B2, again, my name is Sheree Johnson. For B2, what's listed here, as Raymond mentioned, in reference to your program goals. Now, for some of you in your documents that you received from us yesterday, you may have notes from your last year application that states that your program goals have not changed since the last application was submitted. But this is truly a great opportunity for your programs to review any progress that you've made in those areas where you've listed your goals. So B2 is that opportunity where you can review those goals from last year, address any progress that has been made, again, making sure that you make any updates and track those updates and track changes. But that is what you're going to do with B2. So again, referencing what you received in terms of what was submitted previously, and you will go from there. We can move on to B3, which is your site allocation worksheet. So unless you have submitted for a slot reallocation, this information will not change. So those of you who have submitted for slot reallocation, you would have been approved for that reallocation. Otherwise, your slot information is site allocation for your slots will not change. You will list that same information on this worksheet. And if we move on to, and also make sure that you're paying attention to the funding stream. So many of you have multiple funding streams. So that could be Head Start, Early Head Start. So please pay attention to which funding stream this tab is referencing. Of course, if you do not have this funding stream at your site, you're going to list it as 0 or leave it as it has been listed from the previous application. But some of you may have gained a new funding stream since the last application. If you have, please make sure that you are paying attention to the appropriate funding stream for that site allocation. And then we'll move on to B7, where B7 is your program schedule. So again, this is information that may carry over from last application cycle, where you're paying attention to everything that's noted there from, the type of program that you have, the funded enrollment for the program options. So that's center-based, home-based, or if you have the family child care home enrollment, FCC, you're gonna make sure that you put that information in each applicable field. And again, moving down to the program schedule area, just making sure that you indicate what's listed in terms of your funded enrollment. If it does not apply, make sure that you list 0. And then you're going to complete the additional information that's listed there under number 3 through 8. I'm just filling in the applicable information. Again, referencing what was submitted previously, unless you have a new slot reallocation that you have been approved for. This information will carry over from the last application period. And then moving on down to numbers 9 through 12, answering those applicable questions as it relates to home visiting, home-based program options, if they apply to your program. And that is for attachments B2, 3, and 7. return back to the presentation. I believe we have a few more bullet points there.
Yeah, we got one more B8. Let me pull that one up. Okay, so I'll just briefly say on this one. So this one is going to be a blank template. You're going to fill this out as appropriate, depending on which ones you have, right? So if you have Head Start and Early Head Start, please check as appropriate. Please enter the number of slots as appropriate and those program options that you offer. I mean, the rest of this, you'll have summary of your previous year progress towards your program goals. So the document that we were just referencing, that Sheree went over, you can put that information here. Your summary towards your fiscal year 22 readiness goals as well. And I don't know why that happened. Okay, so you're gonna go through, provide the information to the fiscal year 22 progress towards program goals here. Your summary of your school readiness goals here. Any other key achievements. So this is kind of like an just overall program profile that we do need to have. Just letting you know, like little tip from last year, make sure that your number of slots is the actual correct number of slots and that your program options are as well. Anything you put on here, Head Start is going to look at your narrative, and Head Start's going to look at those B3 through 7 attachments as well. They really do connect the dots. So take a few minutes and just make sure that the slots are accurate and that it aligns with everything else you've said everywhere. Because once again, they will review that and they will flag it, and then they're going to have us go back and change it. So I will now share back to the PowerPoint. And then this is going to get us to, so that is the attachment B documents. And I'm just going to say one last time, and we kind of said it before, but the attachments that you already received that you notice have been pre-filled out, those are the most recent versions that you received or that you turned in last year, and that already has Head Start's kind of like a stamp of approval. So you do need to update them, but use track changes. And really you should only be updating things that are critical and any key updates. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to walk us through the attachment C documents, also known as the governance approvals.
Hello, thank you, Raymond Barrett, and I thank you, Sheree Johnson and Nicole Roberts for the review and discussion of the A and B attachments. We will next discuss Section 3, governance approval. This includes your C attachments 1 through 10 that must be submitted through the grant application email. Before we go into looking at the attachments, I would like to provide just an overview of why we have shared governance, which is unique to Head Start. Head Start Performance Standard 1301 mandates that you must have a governing body that functions together, shared governance between your parent policy committee and your board of directors. This is also, as a mandate, a requirement in the Chicago Early Learning 2.0 version manual. DFSS also represents and mirrors what agencies have in their governing bodies and their governance area, as this mandate is a requirement. You have the CCUO, which represents the advisory board for DFSS, and you have the Chicago Citywide Parent Policy Committee, showing total oversight as required by the Head Start Performance Standard. Your board of directors provides ultimate oversight for your program. They also are responsible for fiscal and financial measures within your program. The PPC in the shared governance process provides input and directions from the parents that support the program. DFSS will also mirror and including that we must submit the attachments C1 to 10 just like delegate agencies submit. It's a seamless governance process. One key point that I wanted to discuss with you is if you have Head Start and Early Head Start grants or programs, you may submit one approval package with one exception. Your SF 424 must be submitted individually. You must have an SF 424 for Head Start and an SF 424 for Early Head Start. Nicole discussed this previously in looking at the A1 attachment. Your SF 424 represents your final version of your budget. And so each grant is attached to a different funding amount. Therefore, each grant has a separate SF 424 that you are required to submit in your C attachments. If you have an Early Head Start and Head Start program and you decide to submit one approval package, you must ensure that all approval language refers to both programs. That's Early Head Start and Head Start together. All of the language must include that. With our Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Grant and the Early Head Start Expansion Grant, they are both separate, and therefore your governance approval must be separate. There's no combination in submitting documents for these grants. Let's discuss additional required documents. We talked about the shared governance process and how you are able to demonstrate and document that you are demonstrating and implementing a shared governance within your program. To do that, your bylaws demonstrate and document how your program implements governance. That shared governance process with your bylaws for your board of directors and your parent policy committee must indicate how a quorum is established and document that process. This is the foundation and is seamless for shared governance. It represents each of your program individually, and therefore it is required that you submit documents from your bylaws for both your board of directors and your parent policy committee. It is most important because you cannot establish governance approval unless a quorum is met. So you must also highlight that information in the board documents that you submit through your attachments. In addition to that, We ask that you ensure that seamless information is distributed and communicated from your bylaws and shows a seamless approval process in documenting the same quorum amount in your minutes, in your approval form, and also that must be represented in your bylaws. This ensures that you will be able to submit your grant application because you have met the requirements for quorum. Something additional to discuss, if it is allowable by your bylaws, the electronic approval process must be accompanied by both copy of emails along with a summary of the electronic approval process for both your board and your PPC. That will constitute a narrative of how you met a quorum and obtained approval. Tips for your board and policy committee. Please note, the biggest tip is that you have August 8th through 12th, which is the same period we have, to obtain governance approval. If your bylaws permit, you are able to obtain approval outside of a regular meeting. You can hold a program or executive committee meeting. You can do this by conference call or electronic vote. If none of these processes are available to you by your framework of your bylaws, then you have to host an emergency meeting. Next slide. Thank you. Attachment C1, your SF 424. We already discussed this and Nicole discussed it in detail. This is actually occurs by the information you put into the attachments for A. What you must do is include the final copy version of your budget SF 424. Ensure that it's printed, signed, and dated, and to show overall governance has occurred. Your board and policy committee chair must sign this document. Next slide. We talked about the SF 424 being a document that denotes your budget. So each program or grant has a separate SF 424. You have to ensure that this is readable and legible, as Raymond Barrett referred to. You also have to include the type of program, whether it's Head Start, Early Head Start, or CCP, and indicate that it is a continuation application. Your DUNS number must be included. All the identifying information must be present on this document. The most important part is that your PPC and your board chair, both duly showing shared governance, must sign this document. It must be legible, readable. You have a section where you have to indicate their first and last name because some signatures are not readable. That should be printed or typed in. The date on this approval form match the other documents that you're showing final approval has occurred. Next slide, please. Attachment C2 and C3 are just certification forms, very important and required. These are signed by your board chair. This shows fiscal oversight. It must be signed, dated, and titled. Next slide. This shows your C attachment, agency name, signature, date, and also it must be printed, the name of your board chair and the title. Next document. Attachment C3. This is tax certification. This is also fiscal oversight and showing that has occurred. It must be completed, dated and signed and titled by your board chair. This shows that you're not fraudulent in any taxes or any criminal activity, and that you have filed taxes in relation. Next slide. This allows you to see that form, how it occurs within the attachments. Next slide. Attachment C4, Statement of Approval. This is a very important document. This attachment is dropped down into your letterhead. It must be signed by your board chair and policy committee chair. Please note, if you have early Head Start and Head Start, you can have combined approval, but you must ensure that that's indicated. If you have early Head Start, Child Care Partnership, and early Head Start expansion, approval must be done separately. We also have a sample where you can see the template from the attachment, and it can be dropped into your agency letterhead. Next slide. Please be aware, this is very important that you're referencing your grant. You must include your grant, and that should scroll down because it has been adapted to also reflect in your body. Your agency letterhead should be there. All dates should be significant that you're talking about the FY23 grant application as you replicate it in the COLA. In addition to that, you insert your agency name in the center, and the date is very important. All of these dates show seamless governance. This sets the stage for what date your PPC chair and your board chair signed as approval for your grant application. So you can provide a dual combo for Head Start, early Head Start form, but you must also make sure that information is in your body. If you have your parent policy committee and your board chair signed together, that's permissible on one C4 statement of approval, as long as the dates are consistent with the last approval was obtained through whatever process is required in your bylaws. If not, and you submit a separate form, that is also permissible as long as your documents align with the approval process that has occurred. This is a critical form here also. Next slide. Attachment C5, Parent Policy Committee Approval Form. The instructions are on page 24. This is a very important document. At the top of the document in red, you're able to enter your agency name and your quorum information. So it's seamless governance in your bylaws. The number that designates a quorum that is required so you can obtain approval must also be the exact same number that you show on this form, along with the approval date. If you attach any other additional emails, so if it's an electronic voting process, they must be attached and include the same identical number of members that voted. Next slide. So let's take a little time to review this document. You can At the top, you have to choose the grant. Remember, you can have early Head Start or Head Start together in a combination. You may also, the grant name, type of grant should also populate. It shows, and that should be helpful and consistency in your your policy committee approval form. It has the period for the FY23 COLA. You insert your agency name, and most importantly, here we have in the middle the number of the committee members that must vote in regards to a quorum. This is also the same number that is in your bylaws. It'll also be the same number in your description that you provide in your minutes, which is a narrative of the entire approval process. This should be a seamless situation for us. Total members, that's a number that you would indicate, the total number of parent policy committee members. Below in the area where it's printed name and signature, most important, this form is. So it establishes and shows your governance. It's shared because you're going to have the same replication of this same document for approval for your board. You must have the name printed, legible, clear, typed. Also, the process in which approval occurred, where the signature, if it's, you have a signature and it was done electronically, then it will show that it's electronic by email. It denotes how your approval process occurred, and it's consistent with what is in your bylaws by what process is permissible. So according to your quorum, the names you have printed, you can have the identical numbers as in a quorum of the names on this form. You can have more than that, but you can't have less than that. If you have less than that, you have not met a quorum, so therefore you have to reconvene, meet until the quorum is met and established, which is defined in your bylaws, same exact number. Let's look in the middle statement right above the name and signature. It says the parent policy committee has approved this grant application budget and the date. This is most important. So the date that you have final budget approval is the date in which you had the last person vote, whether that's by electronic, email, whether it's by Zoom, whether it's by conference call. That must be documented in this form, and also seamless and showing what is defined in your bylaws, that your approval process occurred according to that. And it also aligns with your minutes, which is a description of how the approval process occurred. Next slide. So for attachment C6, parent policy committee approval minutes, we do not have an attachment template for this. But there is a requirement for all minutes for governance approval. All minutes must have a discussion. It's the narrative piece. Your minutes must show how you obtain and demonstrated shared governance and approval of your FY23 grant application. If your minutes are available and not available, there's a place marker at this time, or you can submit draft version of your minutes. If your voting occurred via conference call or via email, you must have a summary of each. Please be aware that your minutes must show your governance process. So it must show how you establish a quorum, must be consistent and seamless with what is defined in your bylaws. It must give a description of how that shared governance discussion took place for approval with all actions, how many members were present, how you voted to, who voted to approve, who abstained, who voted against. All of this must be documented and seamless in your approval minutes. This also mirrors what should occur with your board minutes. If you have an electronic process, any other process, such as conference call, any supporting evidence to substantiate the vote must also be submitted with your PPC approval form and also affirm your meeting minutes. Next slide, please. So your PPC bylaws. Your PPC bylaws document, as we talked about before, how shared governance occurs. And it also defines how a quorum should be met. Those documents you already have on file. So after this meeting and you have the COLA email, you could even submit those. You must provide a copy of your parent policy committee bylaws, and you must highlight what denotes the number of members present in order for a quorum to be established and for the governance approval to occur. Next slide. C8, your board approval form, exact same process. Next slide, we'll look at the form. So again, you choose the grant type that should populate and show in the FY 2023 grant application date. It should show the same selection for your grant. We hope that helps to dispel errors. So your grant that you select can be combined Head Start and Early Head Start, but not for Early Head Start Expansion or Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, because they are separate grants. This is an area where error can occur because we're trying to document the approval process, a lot of different forms, but this form for your board must reflect its minutes, must reflect the bylaws, seamless governance. Same process and same forms that DFSS must submit to. Indicate the narrative section in red, your agency. Again, same mirrored process. What is your quorum, which is also denoted in your bylaws that you have submitted, so it's seamless governance. You must indicate the total number of members on your form that represent your board. In addition to that, you can have on the form again the same mirrored process of governance. You should have at least the name, number of members present that voted in the printed name section, and the signature to indicate if it came in person, a person's signature, or electronic signature by email or conference call if that occurred. If it was by Zoom, that would also be indicated. So this form is very important, and it has to be seamless and verified, a descriptive process with your minutes. Also, be aware that all documents have to align, and this reflects the same process that occurred with your PPC. Next slide. So we'll discuss attachment C9, board approval minutes. Instructions for this is found in your instruction pages 24 to 25. There's no template again, mirrors the same process with your PPC. It must, however, include a discussion of how your approval process occurred, who sustained, who voted for, and it must also provide a narrative of how your shared governance, your governance for the board occurred, that entire process. As soon as you have the minutes in draft form, please submit them. If not, you can submit a placeholder from your agency letterhead indicating they're pending and a tentative date for submission. If you vote via conference call, again, you need to have a summary of the call meeting, which actually is the same for the PPC minutes. If you have your voting process occur via email, you must have that brief summary of your electronic voting process and all approval emails that occur in your board approval packet. If a quorum was established, you need to indicate what number was presented for your quorum, which reflects in your bylaws. If you had questions or discussion took place, you must indicate that. It must note how members voted, whether they approved, abstained, or voted against. Again, a copy of each approval email must be submitted. That is attached to your approval form, your board approval form that we discussed previously. And if you align those together and that actually reflects what has occurred, how you documented your board approval form, then that seamless process and review process can occur quickly, and we're able to submit the application to show your shared governance. Next slide. So your bylaws. We talked about your bylaws for your PPC, same requirement. Your bylaws is your evidence of shared governance, how you carry that out. And so board bylaws must be submitted, and we ask that you highlight how a quorum is established. Your minutes will show that you followed the same process within your bylaws, showing seamless governance. Instructions are on page 25. Next slide, please. Attachment C11. This is unique and does not occur often. This is delegation of board responsibilities. If you have this process established within your bylaws, or you have resolutions about responsibilities and authority delegation, then those must be submitted through the attachment C11. This is something that is a different type of situation, does not occur often. Next slide. So it's most important that you meet the deadline that DFSS has established, and so we can complete the application and submit it to HSES. We will be reviewing your governance documents once they are submitted. Final submission date is August 12th at 5 p.m. We are here to support you and really appreciate your commitment to shared governance and your working attitude and support in getting this grant application completed. Remember that August 8th to the 12th is the time in which your governance boards should meet, your PPC and your board of directors, which is the same timeline that DFSS who's here too. So I thank you so very much for your patience and your support in completing the application. We will be reviewing the documents, and you can use the grant application email to submit them. Thank you very much. Raymond, I would like to turn everything over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so if you have questions about anything in general, you know, Nicole shared her contact info or her team's contact information, but highly recommend that you do try to put as much as you can through the HSEHS grant app, which is the email that you receive both the invitation to the webinar and your award packets from. We're all kind of CC'd on that, so whatever you direct on there, it makes it a little bit easiest for us to kind of decipher and direct those calls as appropriate. So those are the best people. You know, if I reach out, I usually put my contact number on there, so you can feel free to call it. Some of you already have my number still, so we'll definitely help support you throughout. Some real quick, just kind of recap of some stuff real quick before we get to questions. You know, once again, make sure you're getting all the documents turned in. There's a reason they're all numbered. And please go through each one and number it. And like Kathy said, please adhere to the deadlines. So we will open up for questions. I will say we did have one in the chat earlier, so I wanted to bring that one up first, which is asking about the training calendar. When should the training calendar start? It's a good question. The training calendar should be from December 1st. So it's based off of the grant life, so the budget period and the performance period. So for all of these grants, it is December 1st through November 30th, 2022. You know, make sure when you're doing your training calendar, it's, you know, or sorry, it's December 1st, 2022 to November 30th, 2023. I'm a year behind. But make sure you put that on top, that you're covering the next fiscal year. That will clearly indicate to Alpha Head Start the time frame that the training calendar is in. And then the rest of the way that you organize it, it's appropriate for your agency, usually works out pretty well. So it is starting December 1st and ending November 30th of next year. Do want to open up to questions. Anyone does have a question at this point, you can put it in the chat. You can also unmute yourself. You can do it that way. Give another few seconds, see if anyone has a question. Also, as a reminder, this recording will be provided after the webinar. So the latest of tomorrow morning, hopefully this afternoon, we'll provide you a link to our YouTube channel. We'll have the video uploaded, and we'll also email out the slides to everyone that, so if you were on that original email thread with either the webinar invite or the award package, you'll get the slides as well. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Okay, well, if hearing that there is, do not see any more questions. Like I said, you can always email this email that you've all received. Contact us. We're here to help support, and you'll receive all these documents shortly. I wish you all a great afternoon and a wonderful rest of your week.